I came without a paper because I wanted to come to Boston to see what the new wing was like, and so that I could not necessarily talk about that, but just have a notion of the context of the conversation. But I do have to say that the Arts of the Americas, is spectacular, and if we could drag Elliot back to New York and put her in the Met, I think we'd have a real revolution.
No.
On our heads. One of the things I really like about that particular wing is that it privileges the visual. Now you say all art museums privilege the visual, but because it's all visual and there's very little to read. Rather than walking through the galleries and collecting information by osmosis, as many people walk through galleries, this has been designed so well that the objects literally grab you and drag you to see what this is and to learn about it. And that is a great feat, and I think that's what how museums should be thinking about their collections, that the collections grab the people viscerally. And the other thing that I want to mention about it is that this sort of, I don't know how you did it, but having the name, The Art of the Americas, that must have been a big conversation behind the scenes, because it is somewhat unfamiliar to many, many people, and I think that alone, just the conversation behind that, and this kind of dislocation for some people, allows them to go in and sort of take it on for its own terms. And I often say, I was just recently in a university museum, and they're trying to figure out how they can change their program, how they could make it more valid, and there are many constraints, and it was sort of conservative and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, first you have to change the name. Change the name of the museum. Because that's a big idea, and I think the donor's name was on the museum, so I don't know if they're going to do that or not. But really, the name, more than the mission statement of the museum, because it's extremely public, defines who you are and allows you to redefine yourself against that. For yourself and the public also will keep your feet to the fire about what your name is. And you just think of all the different museums, and it also tells you how well you're doing with that. You think of the various museums, like the Tang Teaching Museum in Saratoga Springs. It's amazing just that word teaching in there gives it an extreme focus that the museum and the campus keeps putting their feet to the fire around that, what that means. And it changes the exhibition. The Whitney Museum of American Art. I'm a trustee. I have yet, because I'm a new trustee, I've yet to have this discussion, what does American mean for you? And we're building a new museum, so there are many other issues up on the table there. But really, it has come up quite a bit. What does American mean for you? And I won't go into that. And it has changed the museum, the program accordingly. And the public asks, you changed it, what does that mean, given your name? Of course, MFA in Boston, Museum of Fine Arts Boston, it's located in a certain location, and spectacularly, that gallery with all the couplings and all the work that is from this place grounds you in where you are, locates you right directly with the name of the museum, but by calling it the Art of the Americas, puts in another context for people to have to grapple with. And I think that is also quite astounding for a museum of this scale, let's put it that way. Because museums of that scale kind of move and change glacially. But I always say that staff are not glaciers. And they can move more fluidly through the cracks of the glacier. However, affecting change is a difficult thing, and I applaud you for that. And again, it was brought up ethnic-specific museums. The name of the ethnic group that is in the title creates this need to define that and redefine it and define it again, and then have to explain it to your public when you change it. And that conversation is what is really important, rather than switching it under the table what you're doing. It comes back to to you via the public, the newspapers, and what have you. And the Museum of Modern Art, I think for a long, long time, that kind of was like lead shoes for the museum in the latter half of the 20th century, because they were the purveyors of this history, and so they were not able to be nimble enough with what contemporary means, because it wasn't in the title. So I think they've sort of come out from under that. I'm sure there were a lot of conversations, and of course new people really kind of shifted that. But it still comes back to that conversation whenever they do anything, and I think it's a good conversation to have. So change the name. The other thing I want to say is that this museum is fantastic in how they've sort of forced you to try to figure out what the relation between these galleries are. But all museums that are called multicultural museums, just like you said, the notion of multicultural museum, I think it's like, I think they're about as much multicultural as Great Britain in 1914. I mean, who decides what's collected, how it's discussed, and that creates who comes to the museum. But at any rate, even in those situations, I think museums can do things, and I'm very pragmatic. I know that I'm considered the rabble-rouser in the museum, but in fact, I love museums, and I try to push them. I try to push them a little farther than they've gone, because they can't. Because rather than sort of demand a radical change, which won't happen, and we'll just continue to talk to each other, I push them a little farther so that, and they see the sky doesn't fall, and then it allows those other people in the museum to sort of think, well, the sky didn't fall. I think I can, and you find like-minded people in the museum and try things within the institution. But one of the thoughts I had going through this museum, and as wonderful as it is, it could really be good for, say, the Met or other museums around the country, is that to have galleries in between, small spaces, moments in between the galleries for focused conversation about a particular topic, or that perhaps you can focus the conversation around things that are not being spoken about in those galleries by objects or video or what have you. But between the galleries, have a moment where you can focus people on a particular idea, the contemporary, the relation to history, other things like that. And also, these little spaces, these moments between galleries, could be really, they don't have to be that large, but they could be space for mixing collections, making those dialogues, just having maybe two objects from the collections from the two different galleries that they're juxtaposed with, and trying to bring out what the curators often have a reason for having these galleries located next to each other, have it come out very clearly, just with two objects, allow for a little conversation space for that as well. And it could be like mixing collections. It could be Asian art with chinoiserie. It could be very, that's not very earth-shattering or classical and neoclassical. It's a start, but really the issue is: are people really getting what you're saying there? You're saying it's chinoiserie, image of Asia, but do people really understand what that is? What does that mean? And it's a way to just visually sort of have that moment. Of course, you could go way further with that. You could talk about revolution in relation to the collections. You could talk about death in relation to the collections. A lot of other issues that a couple of objects can bring out in these sort of temporary, changing, liminal spaces. And you could have other curatorial voices in these spaces curate just a couple of things that could change the whole way one would walk through and see the rest of the museum. Okay, I see the influence of contemporary art in this museum too. And I bring that up because, as a visual artist, you can see the last 20 years reflected in the design of the building. And there must be all artists who've been through the MFA or other art schools, bringing some of their art history and their technology and their artistry into the museum, like the videos in the specialized gallery for showing how things are collected and also conserved. There's videos that are spectacular. And what I also enjoy is the line of chairs, each one having a name of a place. And then at the last one, you have Barbados, which has a whole other story brought out. I mean, I stood there while watching some elderly people looking at each label, and I was just waiting for them to get to that one, but I couldn't stay. And that sort of word image, you know, idea, that didn't come out of nowhere. Advertising installed it in, now the museum is, which I'm really glad. And then one of my favorite spaces is the Manning House frame. The Manning House frame is this rough-hewn structure, and beneath it are these really fine or early American objects. It's the weight of it, without the walls, comes in on you, and you get this intense feeling and this difference between the beautiful and the weight of the space without having the walls. That kind of juxtaposition, you know, and where your mind has to go to sort of make it is a very contemporary idea, and I just really just love that. The other thing that I have to say is, while this is called Whose Story Is It?, I would like to say about all of our museums, whose point of view is it? Because it's really about point of view. And objects in museums tell all sorts of stories, and people have stories about them. But when they come together, there's a point of view being proffered. And it's not necessarily a bad point of view. They all are interesting points of view. But in our museums, since I live in New York, I think about the Met a lot, that question comes to me over and over and over again. And you know, what I think, you know, if I could speak for 2 minutes more, I would like to say that, you know, the point of view can be shifted by having curators from other places coming in. But if there is a true desire for, okay, it's not, this is my last line here. If there's a true desire to sort of look at various stories and a new point of view, we have to sort of reconsider opening up, making it a more big tent for trustees, think about various ways to involve trustees and look at their various attributes that not only help the museum's bottom line directly, but indirectly bring membership up and a different point of view to the museum.